All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle one of the most explosive ideas in all of political history, and it all starts with a single line, a line that's been shaking governments to their core for centuries. You see, this one sentence from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, it's not just some dramatic opening line. No, it's the actual key. It unlocks his entire, and I mean radical, view of what a state even is. And maybe more importantly, what happens when it fails. Okay, so section 1, a state can disappear. And the big idea here is that to Rousseau, the state isn't sacred, it's just a tool. And this leads us to a premise that was, absolutely shocking back in his day. Rousseau just didn't see the state as this permanent, God-given thing. For him, it was just a tool, a man-made agreement that came with conditions. And just think about that for a second. If that tool breaks, if it stops doing its one and only job, which is to maximize our freedom, we don't just, try to patch it up. We have the right to throw it away. Just get rid of it. I mean, you can imagine this idea was a direct attack on the absolute power of kings, on this whole notion that political structures were supposed to last forever. So, part 2, the general will explained. This is the one true measure of a state's health. Okay, so if a state can be thrown away, how do we even know when it's broken? Well, Rousseau gave us a diagnostic tool for that. He came up with a single metric to judge the health of any state, and he called it the general will. Now, it is absolutely crucial to get this distinction right. The general will, it's not what's trending on social media. It's not what 51% of people vote for in an election. Nope. It's the deep, underlying, long-term common good for the entire community. We're talking future generations, too. Now, that's a really powerful concept, right? But it also comes with this huge challenge. Who actually gets to define what the general will is? And what's to stop a simple majority from just saying, hey, our interests are the common good? And this really gets to the heart of how fragile Rousseau thought power was. I mean, a government could win a massive, landslide election. It could have huge popular support. But if its actions only serve the short-term whims of that majority, and it comes at the expense of the whole community's long-term health, then that government has lost its legitimacy, period. By Rousseau's definition, it's a failing state. All right, section 3, Rousseau's formula for decay. This is the step-by-step process of a state's collapse. So how does this failure actually play out? Rousseau didn't just point out the problem. He actually gave us a formula, a clear step-by-step process for how a healthy state rots and collapses from the inside out. Yeah, it's basically a domino effect. It all starts when private interests, what I want, what my group wants, start to matter more than the public good. And when that happens, politics stops being a search for what's best for all of us. Instead, it just becomes a raw power struggle between competing groups. At that point, the general will, that common good we were talking about, it's gone. It's invisible. The state isn't making real laws anymore. It's just issuing orders that help out the powerful. And that's the final stage right before the whole thing just falls apart. Section 4. Echoes in our modern world. Are we witnessing Rousseau's prophecy unfold? Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. Because, this isn't just some dusty 18th century philosophy. Rousseau's formula for decay, it's a startlingly relevant way to look at our own world, right now. So the big question is, are we seeing these same symptoms today? So let's look at the first modern symptom, individualism and fragmentation. Just think about it. Our modern world, especially with social media, is amazing at creating these little echo chambers, right? They divide us into tribes that have totally different values. And when the main goal becomes personal gain or just making sure our side wins, that shared idea of a common, long-term good, that general will, it becomes almost impossible to even see, let alone agree on. Then there's symptom 2, politics as just interest adjustment. I mean, take a hard look at how politics often works today. Does it really feel like a search for the common good? Or does it feel more like an arena where powerful lobbyists, big corporations, and angry social media mobs are all just fighting for influence? This is exactly what Rousseau was warning about. When politics is nothing more than adjusting private interests, that's a huge symptom of decay. The state isn't a guardian anymore. It's just a referee in a cage match. And all of that leads to the final, and honestly the most dangerous symptom, a full-blown crisis of legitimacy. What happens when tons of people stop believing that elections are fair or that institutions are neutral, when they lose faith in the credibility of the state itself? Well, according to Rousseau, that's it. That's the terminal stage. The social contract starts to tear apart because that core belief, the belief that the state is actually serving the general will, is just gone. All right, on to part 5, the real threat to freedom.
And this is the twist in Rousseau's warning. Now, after hearing all that, you might be thinking, okay, so the state gets weaker? That's a good thing, right? More personal freedom for me. But hold on, because here comes the big twist in Rousseau's argument.
He really forces us to ask this super fundamental question. Does a weaker state automatically mean more personal freedom? What actually happens when the state, the one we know, starts to fade away? Well, the common assumption, especially from a certain point of view, is that less state equals more freedom. Simple as that. But Rousseau's warning is the exact opposite. He says that when a legitimate state, one that's actually trying to serve the general will, dissolves, it doesn't just leave this nice open space. Oh no, it leaves a vacuum, and something always rushes in to fill a vacuum. And the powers that replace the state, they're often way more brutal and have zero accountability. See, power never just vanishes, it just changes hands. It can shift to giant corporations that control everything from our data to our daily lives, or to angry mobs and vigilante groups, or even to rigid religious authorities or armed factions who rule by sheer force. For Rousseau, the collapse of the state doesn't lead to some kind of free-for-all utopia, it leads to new and honestly much more terrifying chains. So that's a pretty bleak picture, right? But what's the cure? This is Section 6, How Do We Rebuild? Rousseau's prescription for a healthy society. Thankfully, he doesn't just leave us in despair. His work actually gives us a powerful prescription for how to rebuild, how to pull a community back from the brink. So, what's the path forward? First, we have to rebuild a sense of the public good, and that means citizens have to participate. It's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? To protect our individual freedom, we have to engage with the collective. Second, we need to be crystal clear about the state's role. It's not supposed to be all-powerful, but it does need to be strong enough to protect the very foundation of our freedom. And third, we've got to find common ground. We need to build a political culture that cares more about long-term stability than it does about winning short-term popular fights. So at the end of the day, the goal isn't to destroy the state. It's to make sure it serves the general will. And that's the crucial takeaway here. Rousseau was not an anarchist. He wasn't some guy who wanted to tear everything down just for the fun of it. He was actually a fierce defender of a legitimate community. His whole project was about one thing, figuring out how to build and maintain a state that genuinely serves the collective long-term interest of its people. And that leaves us with the same challenge he posed centuries ago, one that feels more urgent right now than maybe ever before. In an age of such deep division, in a world that feels so fragmented, how do we even begin to find our general will again?